The solicitor's clock had been striking the hour for what felt like an age, and Seraphine Ashbury had not heard a single chime of it. She sat very straight in the leather chair, gloved hands folded in her lap, and stared at the document spread across the desk, as though sheer will might rearrange the words. "Read it again," she said. "Miss Ashbury, I have read it 3 times. Then read it a 4th, Mr. Havergill." The solicitor sighed. Rain ran down the window of his chambers in Lincoln's Inn. A coal fire hissed. "The codicil is unambiguous. Your father executed it in the spring of 1811, the year before his death, in the presence of 2 witnesses. The estate at Faringmere, the London house on Adelphi Terrace, the holdings in the funds, the interest in the Bristol shipping concern, and the sum held in trust at Messieurs Oir and Company, amounting in total to some £90,000, will pass to you in full on the condition that you are married by the end of your 25th year. That year concludes on the 9th day of the monthist. You have 30 days, Miss Ashbury. If on the 30th day you remain unwed, every piece of it passes to your cousin, Lionel Pickering. There is no alternative. There is no appeal." She had heard him the first time. Hearing it again did nothing to make it real. "My father loved me." "He did, madam." "Then why?" Havergill folded his hands. He spoke of a daughter who had turned down 4 offers in as many seasons. He spoke of a fear that you would grow old alone, and the estate fall to a cousin he did not esteem. "I can only tell you what he set his hand to and what the law will enforce." Seraphine stood. The room tilted. She put a hand on the back of the chair until it steadied. 30 days, to be married, not to find, not to be betrothed. The codicil is specific. There must be a solemnized marriage by the 9th. "Yes, madam. The posting of banns alone requires 3 Sundays. A common license might serve, if the bishop's clerk were obliging. But I must present him with a name. I do not have a name." "No, madam. Who knows of this?" "Myself, my clerk, the 2 witnesses, and as of yesterday evening, your cousin, Mr. Pickering, to whom the terms were communicated by letter at the direction of the deceased." She shut her eyes. Of course her father, loving her, and fearing for her, and mistrusting her cousin in equal measure, had felt bound to notify the man who stood to gain in the interest of what he would have called fairness. Her father had been a fair man. Fairness, applied without tenderness, became cruelty, and the codicil was the exact shape of that cruelty rendered in legal Latin. "I shall return tomorrow at 10. At the door she turned. "Mr. Havergill, if I were to come to you on the morning of the 9th with a husband in tow and a clergyman willing to read the service, would you recognize it?" "I would examine the certificate, madam, and the license, and if both were in order, I would recognize it without hesitation." "Thank you." She went down the stairs with her head quite high, and her maid Berthwin fell in behind her. They did not speak until they were both in the carriage, and the door was shut. Then Seraphine pressed her forehead against the cold window and allowed herself, for precisely 4 seconds, to make a sound that was not quite a word and not quite a sob. Berthwin produced a clean handkerchief and laid it on the seat beside her hand, and waited. By the time they reached Adelphi Terrace, she had done her arithmetic. She required a man of rank sufficient to procure a common license and willing to consent. She had refused 4 offers in 6 seasons. Of those 4, 1 was dead of a fever in Portugal. 1 had married her dearest friend. 1 had removed to the West Indies, and the last would sooner throw himself from Westminster Bridge than renew his suit. Of gentlemen who had not offered but might be persuaded, 9 of a dozen were too young, too indebted, too foolish, or too plainly interested in her fortune. That left 3. Of the 3, 2 were promised elsewhere. That left 1, She stared at the upholstery of the carriage and said the name to herself, and felt her stomach turn over at the sound of it. Torrin Vale, the Duke of Rookscar, who had despised her from the first moment he had laid eyes on her, and had not troubled himself to disguise it since. It was not a gentle dislike. It was something colder and more particular, and it had begun her first season, when she had been 19, and had said something at a dinner in Cavendish Square that she had not understood to be cruel until she saw his face change. She remembered that it had been about a poem, and that the poem had been written by a man she now knew to have been a friend of his who had died that autumn at sea. And she remembered the way his eyes had gone flat and gray, like the inside of a shell, and the way he had set down his wine glass and excused himself. He had never forgiven her. She had written him a letter of apology, which he had returned unopened. For 6 years he had treated her with a steady, polite, public indifference. There was nothing to be done with him. She had told herself so for 6 years, and now she was going to have to plow that corner, because there was no other field. He was a duke. He could procure a license in a morning. He was unmarried, 9 and 20, in full possession of his faculties. The Rookscar estates were solvent, so he could not be suspected of marrying her for her money. He was the only candidate in London who met every requirement, and he loathed her. She went up the steps of the house and gave her cloak to the footman, and went straight to the writing room without removing her bonnet. She sat down at her father's old desk. She sharpened a pen. She dipped it. She wrote, "Your Grace, I write upon a matter of the most urgent personal significance, and I must beg the very great favor of a private interview at your earliest convenience. I am aware that I have no claim upon your kindness. I do not ask for kindness. I ask only for 1/2 of 1 hour of your time, at any hour and in any place you should appoint. And I pledge my word that after that half hour, if you should wish it, you will not be troubled by me again. I remain your Grace's most obedient servant, Seraphine Cordelia Ashbury." She sanded it, folded it, sealed it with black wax, and wrote the direction in a hand she was proud to see did not shake. "Have this taken to Rookscar House at once. Wait for a reply." The footman went out. She sat at the desk and did not move for a long time, and the sleet at the window turned back into rain. The reply came at 5:20, by which time Seraphine had walked the length of the library 11 times. The footman presented the folded paper on a salver. She took it with a hand she did not trust, and broke the seal. It said, in a black, spare hand with no flourish, "Madam, I shall receive you tomorrow at 11. Rookscar." Nothing else. No civility. She had braced for refusal and been given instead a single cold assent, and the cold assent was in some ways worse, because it meant that tomorrow at 11 in the morning she was going to walk into the library of a man who hated her and ask him to marry her. She did not sleep. She lay in the great bed and composed the speech in her head, and rejected it, and composed another, and by dawn had settled on the only one that had the virtue of being true, which was the plainest. She would tell him the facts. She would ask. He would refuse. She would go home. At 11:15 she stepped down from her carriage in front of Rookscar House in Berkeley Square. The butler who opened the door was a man of perhaps 60, with the stillness of long service. He took her card. He took her cloak. He showed her into a library on the ground floor. "His Grace will attend you presently, madam." And he withdrew. She stood in the middle of the room and counted her breaths. It was a splendid room. Walls lined to the ceiling with books, fire-lit, 2 long windows onto the square, a turkey carpet the color of old wine. She thought, this is his room. None of the 1,000 times he will sit in that chair will be with me in it. The door opened. Torrin Vale, the Duke of Rookscar, came in. He was taller than she remembered. He was dressed plainly in a dark coat and buff pantaloons. His hair was black, cut short, already showing at the temple the first thread of gray. His eyes, when they came to rest on her, were the same flat shell gray she remembered from Cavendish Square. He bowed, just barely. "Miss Ashbury." "Your Grace." "You asked for half an hour. I will give you 20 minutes. Please sit." He did not sit. He stood by the mantel with one hand resting on it. She sat in the chair closest to the fire and arranged her hands in her lap. She had decided during the sleepless night that she would not remove her gloves, because if she removed her gloves, he would see her hands shaking. "I thank you for receiving me." "You need not. What do you want?" The rudeness steadied her. "My father placed a condition in his will that I did not know of until yesterday. I must be married by the 9th day of next month, or forfeit the whole of his estate to a cousin. That gives me 30 days from yesterday. By reason of the banns, the time, and the nature of the gentlemen of my acquaintance, I find that I have one realistic prospect of complying, and I have come to present it to you." He did not move. He looked at her with an attention that was so complete, it felt like being handled. "You are asking me to marry you?" "I am." "For your fortune?" "Yes. My fortune is £90,000, and an estate in Hampshire, and a house on Adelphi Terrace. If I forfeit, the whole passes to my cousin Lionel Pickering, who has been in communication with a racing establishment at Newmarket that is not the sort that improves the character of its patrons. I do not intend to give him my father's work. I have come to you because you are unmarried, of sufficient rank to procure a common license. The Rookscar estates are solvent. And because I consider you a man of your word. I understand perfectly that you hold me in no regard. I am not asking for regard. I am asking for a contract." She waited. He had not moved. "Go on." "I propose the following. We marry by common license, as quickly as may be managed. On the morning of the wedding, I will settle 3/4 of the capital upon trustees for the benefit of any children, and failing children, for charitable purposes. I will retain the remaining quarter and my mother's jointure. You will not be asked to touch 1 penny of the Ashbury money. You will be under no obligation, beyond the obligations of the marriage service, with respect to my person. We will live under one roof for the sake of appearances. At the end of a 12-month, if you find the arrangement insupportable, I will remove to Faringmere. I will give you sons, if God wills. I will trouble you otherwise as little as it is possible for a wife to trouble a husband." She had said it all without taking a breath. She took one now. "Is that all?" "That is all, Your Grace." "You have rehearsed it." "I have thought it through." "You have rehearsed it. I can hear where the sentences begin. I prefer you to tell me why, in the 6 years I have known you, you have never once given me any reason to suppose that you would voluntarily enter a room in which I stood, and why you have come today to offer me your hand." She lifted her chin. "Because I have run out of rooms, Your Grace." Something passed across his face. It was not a smile. It was not anything she had seen on his face before. It was there and it was gone. "You have run out of rooms." "I have. I am being entirely truthful. I am not offering you myself out of any affection, and I should think it an insult if I pretended that I was. I am offering you a settlement that is to your advantage, because you will acquire a wife who will not importune you for your attention, and the satisfaction of having delivered a woman you despise from a ruin that would gratify a cousin you have never met, but would, I think, despise more than you despise me. You are very certain I despise you. Your Grace, I've had 6 years in which to become certain." He left the mantel. He crossed to the window. He stood with his back to her and looked out into the square. A carriage went past in the street. The fire crackled. "If I say yes, you will be bound for the rest of your life to a man whom by your own account you have spent 6 years trying not to be in a room with. I am aware of the price. Say that word again. She paused. I am aware of the price, Your Grace. He did not turn. You may go. Return tomorrow at this hour, and I will give you my answer. She rose. She had her hand on the door when he spoke again, and his voice was quieter, and it was not a voice she had heard from him before. Miss Ashbury, the poem, at Cavendish Square, in the spring of 1809. Do you remember whose it was? Her hand tightened on the handle. I did not know at the time, Your Grace. I learned afterwards. I have regretted it every year since. I see. Is that why? She began and stopped. Tomorrow at 11, Miss Ashbury. She did not remember going down the stairs. She was in the carriage before she understood that she was, and Berthwin was looking at her. And Berthwin said, Miss, are you well? And she said, Yes, I am well. And it was the first lie she had told in a long time, and she did not think it would be the last. He said yes at 8 minutes past 11 the following morning, standing in the same place at the mantel. I have considered your proposition. I accept it. I will procure the license today. I will ask my mother to call upon you this afternoon. We will marry at St. George's in Hanover Square on the morning of the 8th. My solicitor will wait upon yours this afternoon. Is there anything you wish to alter? She had sat up half the night writing an alternative letter, one she would send when he refused. She unclenched her fingers from around it. No, Your Grace. Very well. I thank you. Do not. I have not done you a kindness. I have accepted a contract for reasons of my own which are not your concern. You owe me no gratitude, and I shall not accept any. One thing. In public, we will behave as a couple who have formed an attachment. That is the price of the fiction. I will not have my mother distressed, nor society amuse itself at either of our expense. In every drawing room in London, we will appear to have chosen one another. Is that acceptable? She heard the word. Price. He had used it a second time. She did not dare to ask if he had chosen it deliberately. It is acceptable. Good. Then you will oblige me by referring to me, in company and in private, by my name. Your Grace. Torrin. It is my name. We are to be married in 3 weeks. You will not go through the ceremony addressing me as though I were a bishop. As you wish. Say it. Torrin. Thank you. Seraphine, she said. She had not meant to. My name is Seraphine. I know it. Good morning, Seraphine. She went out. On the steps of Rookscar House, she stood for perhaps 5 seconds with her hand on the iron rail, and she understood that she had got what she had come for, and that it was not at all the thing she had come for. It was worse because he had said her name, and she had not prepared for the way her name would sound in his voice. The Dowager Duchess of Rookscar arrived at Adelphi Terrace at 3:30. She was a small, upright woman of about 60, in a gray pelisse, and she took both of Seraphine's hands in hers and said, My dear child. And she was crying, quietly. I knew nothing of this until this morning. I have been trying for 5 years to make my son look at a young woman with any kind of expression. Today he walked into my morning room and told me he was to be married to Miss Ashbury on the 8th of next month. My dear, will you answer a mother's question? Are you happy? Seraphine had practiced answers. Sitting on the blue sofa with the Dowager holding her hand, she found she could not speak any of them. Ma'am, I am going to marry your son because I must, and he is going to marry me for reasons he has not disclosed to me. I do not know whether I shall be happy. I know I shall try very hard to be a good wife to him. That is all the answer I can give you, and I think it would be wrong to give you any other. The Dowager looked at her for a long moment. You will do. Any young woman who could sit in my drawing room and tell me that, without weeping, and without flattering me, is a young woman I can work with. Now, we have 3 weeks. You will come to dinner tomorrow at Rookskar House. You will not wear black. You will not apologize to Torin for anything, because he will misunderstand any apology. You will be civil, and you will let me do most of the talking. The dinner the following evening included an elderly cousin of the house, Mr. Abney Kilgarn, who spent the meal telling stories about the Peninsular Campaign. The Duke said almost nothing. She had been warned. She had not been warned that at one point, during a story about Badajoz, he would glance across the table at her with something in his expression she could not identify, and then look away. The announcement appeared in the Gazette, and by Sunday the whole of London was talking. The engagement was unaccountably sudden. The condition of her father's will, which had somehow become known within 36 hours, was almost certainly the cause. That Tuesday, Seraphine went to a reception at Lady Maricom's in Bruton Street. The conversation dipped as she and the Dowager entered. It did not stop. It dipped and resumed, and dipped again, and Seraphine walked through the room at the Dowager's elbow, with her chin up, and then she saw, across the room, a man she had not seen in 3 years. His name was Captain Everard Mornay, late of His Majesty's 15th Light Dragoons, and she had once believed, at 20, that she was going to marry him. He had come near to asking, and then his regiment had been ordered to the peninsula, and his letters had grown briefer, and within a 12-month he had stopped writing altogether. A year after that, she had heard he had resigned his commission on account of an inheritance from an uncle in Yorkshire. He was crossing the room now. The Dowager had been pulled aside. For a single exposed moment, Seraphine was alone, and he was bowing. Captain Mornay. Mr. Mornay now. The captaincy belongs to another man's horse these 2 years past. I had not known you were returned to town. I returned last week. I came tonight in the hope of seeing you. I'm engaged, Mr. Mornay. So I have read. I congratulate you. To the Duke of Rookskar. Yes, he looked at her. Not at her face. At her, as a man looks at a woman to take her in. Miss Ashbury, forgive me if I am blunt. Is it true what is being said? That you are marrying him under the compulsion of a testamentary condition? The room did not quite go quiet. It seemed to her that it did. My reasons for marrying are my own. Of course, I understand only that if there were any impediment in the business, any difficulty whatever, I should be obliged to you if you would apply to me. I have come into some property. I am not the man who went to Spain. There is no difficulty. He did not go. He remained in front of her, and she understood, with a coldness at the nape of her neck, that the man who had once been too poor to ask her had returned with money, and had read in the paper that she had £90,000 and a husband who did not want her. Good evening, Mr. Mornay. Good evening, Miss Ashbury. I shall hope to see you again. He moved away. Before she could turn to find the Dowager, she felt a hand at her elbow. Torin. Seraphine. His face was composed. His eyes were not. They were looking across the room at the back of Mr. Mornay's coat, and they were not cold any longer. They were something else. She had no name for it. Come, he said, quite gently. My mother requires you in the next room. His hand stayed at her elbow, steady and warm through her glove. When they reached the further drawing room, he released her and said, not looking at her, Who was that man? His name is Mornay. He was a friend of my family 3 years ago. A friend who stood rather close to you. I do not know what you mean. I think you do. She was too tired to pretend. He wished me to know that if there were any difficulty with my engagement, he would be glad to be of service. The Duke was quiet for 3 seconds. Torin, I will not. I have not asked you anything. I was going to say that I should like to walk with you to the carriage. My mother will make our excuses. Her hand was shaking inside her glove. He had seen it, and he put his own hand out, palm open, waiting for her to decide. She put her hand in his. He closed his fingers over hers. He did not let go until they reached the carriage, and when the door was shut and the carriage was moving, she heard him say, so quietly, that she was not sure whether he had meant her to hear it at all, "He will not have you. Not while I am alive." She did not answer. She pressed her hand against the cold leather of the seat, and she felt his words go all the way through her like a coin slipping through dark water. She did not sleep that night either. The days that followed settled into a rhythm she had not expected. She called it, privately, the performance. Mornings, she received visitors. Afternoons, the dowager came for her at 3. Evenings, she dined at Rookskar House. There was always someone else at table, placed as a chaperone in the way that a small stone is placed on a paper to keep it from blowing away. They were never alone. The Duke had thought of this before she had, and she understood he had thought of it for her sake and not his own, and the understanding lodged under her breastbone and would not dislodge. On the Thursday of the second week, the dowager had a headache, and Mr. Kilgarn had been sent for, but had not arrived, and they sat at opposite ends of a table laid for 3, with the butler, Manning, behind the Duke's chair, and the footman Oric behind her own, and they were, for the first time, essentially alone. He said without looking up, "You were at Lady Kettleworth's yesterday. Was it difficult?" It was. What did Miss Adela Kettleworth say? She set down her spoon. She said, in a voice not quite loud enough for her mother, that she wondered what my father's solicitor was charging for drafting a codicil that produced a duke at the altar in 30 days, because she would like to engage him for her own next season. The Duke did not move. I did not answer her. Her mother came into the room. Good that you did not answer. An answer would have made the remark a matter of discussion. By not answering, you made it a matter that reflected only upon her. I thought only that if I opened my mouth I would cry, and that I would not cry in Adela Kettleworth's drawing room for any fortune in the kingdom. He looked up. It was the first time during the meal. You did well, Seraphine. Later, when the fish was cleared, he said, My mother wishes us to ride in the park tomorrow. I have told her we will. I do not ask you to enjoy it. I do ask you to do it. Of course. Can you ride? Yes. Are you any good? I am competent. He almost smiled. Did not quite happen. The ride went as he had said. They went at a walk past the carriages of everyone in London, and Lady Wennet, who was a woman with a tongue like a saw, said afterwards to 17 different people that Miss Ashbury and His Grace of Rookskar were, on close inspection, a remarkably well-matched pair. By Sunday morning, the report had acquired a life of its own. On Sunday afternoon, a card was delivered at Adelphi Terrace, and Seraphine went quite still. Mr. Everard Mornay requests the honor of waiting upon Miss Ashbury. I am not at home to Mr. Mornay now, nor at any other hour. If he returns, the same answer. If he writes, the letter is to be placed upon my desk. He did return. Tuesday and Thursday, refused. On Friday, a letter came. My dear Miss Ashbury, I have tried upon 3 occasions to pay my respects. If you are again not at home on Monday, I shall not trouble you further, except to say this. I have reason to believe that certain particulars of your present situation are known to parties who would be glad of a larger currency for them. I should be sorry to see such particulars exposed. Everard Mornay. She read it twice. She put on her pelisse, got into the carriage with the letter in her reticule, and said, Rookskar House. Manning received her without expression of surprise. His Grace is in the library, madam. I will inform him. The Duke was standing by the fire with a paper he folded and set aside as she came in. He did not ask what the matter was. He took in her face and the reticule she was holding a little too tightly, and drew up a chair to the fire. Sit. Manning will bring you tea." She handed him the letter. He read it standing. When he had finished, he laid it on the mantel and looked at her, and his face had gone not colder, but stiller. "How long?" "A week. He called Tuesday, Thursday, and has written today asking to come Monday." "You have refused him. Good. What particulars does he suppose himself to possess?" She held her hands tight in her lap. "The clause is known to my solicitor, his clerk, the two witnesses, myself and my cousin, Lionel." "I do not believe any of the first four would speak. I think my cousin has calculated that his only chance of recovering what he has lost is to see the engagement broken before the 9th, and has been looking for an instrument. I think Mr. Mornay has offered himself as that instrument. You have thought about this. I have thought about very little else today. And you came here at once. As soon as I had read it twice." He looked at the letter. He looked at her. "Seraphine, listen. You will do nothing. You will answer no letter. You will receive no visit. If he presents himself at your door, he is to be refused. If he presents himself in a drawing room, you will ignore him. You will not be left alone in any room in which he is present. That last is my own concern. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Good. You will leave the management of Mr. Mornay and your cousin to me." She drank. He stood by the fire and watched her drink, and after a little while he said, very quietly, "You came to me. You did not write. You did write." Something in his voice. She could not look at him. "Thank you," she said, into the cup. "Finish your tea. Go to my mother in the morning. Tell her nothing of this. Tell her only that you would be glad of her company. She likes to be told she is wanted." "Yes. Good girl." He had not meant to say it. She heard it in the pause that followed. He had said it in the tone a man uses to a frightened horse or a child who has done as she was told. In the instant after, he stepped back half a pace and turned the letter on the mantel face down. She set down the cup and stood. "Your Grace, I will see you on Friday." She walked to the carriage. She sat very still as it moved toward Adelphi Terrace. "Good girl." She pressed the back of her gloved hand against her mouth. Mr. Mornay did not call Monday. He did not call that week. She did not know what the Duke had done. She did not ask. But on the Tuesday evening of the 3rd week of the engagement, she was at a small private concert at Lady Penstow's in Hill Street, and she saw, on the other side of the room, her cousin Lionel Pickering standing by the door, and she saw the Duke cross the room to him in a manner so casual that half the company did not notice, and she saw them speak for perhaps 2 minutes, and she saw her cousin's face go the color of paper, and she saw her cousin leave the room. The Duke came back and offered her his arm. "The second piece is beginning. Shall we go in?" He did not speak of her cousin. She did not ask. But she did not like, that night, the way he had looked across the room at Lionel. It was the same gray stillness he had turned upon Mornay, and she understood, although no one had told her, that 2 warnings had now been delivered, and that whatever was going to happen next was not going to be a warning. It rained all of Wednesday and Thursday, and was still raining at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, when Seraphine was set down at Rookscar House for tea with the Dowager, and discovered that the Dowager had been called away by a sudden indisposition of an elderly aunt, and had left instructions for tea to be served to Miss Ashbury, and for His Grace to be informed. She went into the small drawing room. The fire had been built up, curtains drawn against the early dark. She took off her bonnet and sat down, and found herself looking at the room as though she might find him in it. On the side table beside a bowl of flowers, there was a small, leather-covered book. She picked it up because her hands required occupation. On the flyleaf, in a firm, spare hand she had seen before, Torrin Vale, Christ Church, 1801. It was a book of poems. She turned a page. Between the 14th and 15th, there was a slip of paper. Cream, thin, not old. She did not take it out. She did. She lifted the edge with her thumb, only enough to see the first words. For W.D., who should have lived to see? She put the book down. He came in. He was in his shirt sleeves. He had not put on his coat. She understood that when Manning had informed him she was here, he had come at once, without going to his dressing room first, and that he did not know he had come without a coat until he saw her face. Forgive me. Do not. I have interrupted you. You have not. He went out. He came back in a dark coat he was still settling at the shoulders. He sat down opposite her and poured his own tea, and he handed her a cup without asking how she took it, because he had watched how she took it at 8 dinners, and he knew. They drank. You looked at a book on the table. I did. I'm sorry. I took it up because I was nervous, and I opened the flyleaf, and I closed it again as soon as I saw what was inside. You saw the slip. I saw the first words. I did not take it out. I know you did not. The slip sticks out on the outer edge. When you put the book down, you did not press it in. She looked at him. He was looking at the fire. You were very careful. I wish to tell you I noticed. He set down his cup. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and looked into the fire. His name was Wesson Derringham. We were at school together, and afterwards at Christ Church. He wrote the poem that I was shown by his sister after he died. He went out in the Elysium with Captain Tremlow in the autumn of 1809, and she broke up off the Breton coast in a gale, and there was no one saved. I laughed. I know. I did not know whose the poem was. I did not know he was your friend. I thought it was a silly poem, because Miss Varley had said it was a silly poem, and I was 19. I know, Seraphine. I am so sorry. You cannot undo it. Neither can I. You laughed, and I looked at you, and I decided in that minute that you were a young woman who laughed at things she did not understand, and that I would never be obliged to understand you. It was an unjust decision. I should have answered your letter. I burnt it. I was 23, and angry, and I could not bear to be told by a 19-year-old girl that I was being unfair. I am telling you now that it was unfair. Why are you telling me now? He reached for the poker, turned a coal, set it down. Because if we go on as we are, Seraphine, we are going to reach the altar on the morning of the 8th. And I have begun to think that I would be sorry to stand at an altar with a woman who believed that I despised her. The rain ran. A coal settled. Do you not despise me? No. You did. I did. I have not for some time. How long? I do not know. Longer than I had thought. I was surprised and somewhat ashamed to discover that I did not, when I received your note last Friday week. They drank their tea. There is one thing more, which I should tell you while we are being truthful. I did not write my letter of apology because a governess told me I must. I wrote it because I had learned whose the poem was, and I had gone to my room and cried for a length of time that alarmed my maid, and when I had done crying, I had gone to my desk and written it. It wasn't a performance. I did not know you well enough to perform anything. Thank you. That is all? That is a great deal. The fire did its slow work. The rain did not stop. Mr. Mornay, has he written again? He has not. He called upon your cousin. They were seen together at a house in Jermyn Street on the Tuesday. I spoke to your cousin the following evening at Lady Penstow's. I observed that his circle of acquaintance had lately grown to include a gentleman in straitened circumstances. I remarked that I was a collector, in my idle hours, of information regarding the debts of such gentlemen, and had lately been interested to learn the precise sum outstanding at a certain hazard room in Pall Mall, against the name of a certain cousin of my affianced. I said all this pleasantly. Your cousin was good enough to understand me without further explanation. You threatened him. I warned him. He left the concert immediately afterwards. Torin, I do not wish to be protected at the cost of your honor. You are not. I have not lied, nor bribed, nor done anything would I be sorry to have reported in the Gazette. I have used information I was entitled to possess to discourage two men from actions that would have injured a woman they had no right to injure. I believe you. Good. If we are to stand at an altar on the 8th, I should like to stand at it as someone who has told you the truth about one more thing. I did not come to you only because you were the last candidate in London. I came to you because I had known for a great many years that if I were ever in real trouble, you were the man in the world to whom I should most have wished to go. I did not understand this about myself until the morning I wrote the note. He did not answer. He stood up. He went to the window and stood with his back to her. Seraphine, if you say any more to me this afternoon, I am not going to be able to keep the terms of the agreement. I will not say any more. Thank you. One word. I am not sorry I came to you. He did not turn. The rain ran on the glass. Nor am I sorry you did. Manning brought the carriage up at 6. At the threshold of the drawing room he stopped, and she stopped, and he said, Friday next, we will ride in the park, if the weather holds. And she said, Friday next, then. And she went out. She had not asked him what it was exactly that he had begun to feel. She thought, as the carriage turned out of Berkeley Square, that perhaps she already knew, and that perhaps he had known it too, for longer than either of them had admitted. The week before the wedding passed, in a manner she would not afterwards be able to set down in any order. She remembered the fitting at Madame Devy's, the silk the color of very cold cream. She remembered that on the Wednesday, the Duke sent over a small package containing a string of pearls that had belonged to his grandmother, and a note of 4 lines in his firm, spare hand. Seraphine. These were my grandmother's. She wore them at her own wedding, and at mine. To you they will be yours. Wear them or not as you please. I should like it if you would. Torin. She wept when she read it. Not hard and not long, but with an abandon Berthwin pretended not to notice. And she remembered the night before the wedding, which was sleepless, and was not sleepless in the way she had expected. The Dowager had arranged that Seraphine should come to Rookscar House, because it was thought proper that a bride with no mother in the country should be housed under the roof of her husband's mother on the eve of the wedding. The Duke had removed himself to his club. Seraphine lay in the strange bed and listened to the clocks of Mayfair strike 10 and 11, and 11:30, and 12, and she had not slept. At 12:15 she rose, put on a wrapper, lit her candle from the fire, and went down to find a less demanding book from the library. At the library door she stopped. A thin strip of light showed beneath it. She pushed the door gently. It swung inward. He was at his desk. He had not been at his club. He was in his shirt sleeves, his coat over the back of the chair, an open decanter at his elbow, a single candle burning on the desk, a pen in his hand, a sheet of paper half written upon. When he looked up and saw her in the doorway in her wrapper, he did not show any surprise at all, as though at some level below thought he had been waiting for her to come in. You should not be here. I know. It is past midnight. I could not sleep. Nor could I. There was no one in the house awake but the two of them, and they both knew it. Come in then. Shut the door. She came in. She set her candle on the small table inside the door. She did not cross to the desk. What are you writing? A letter I will not send. To myself. Some evenings I find I can clarify my thoughts by writing them to no one. The letters are burnt in the morning. Sit, Seraphine. She sat in the chair by the fire. He turned his chair a little towards her. I have been thinking about what I am going to say to you tomorrow at the altar, and whether I can say it in a way that will be true. I must say, upon my honor, that I take you for my wedded wife, to have and to hold, for better, for worse, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part. I cannot bring myself to the altar to say those words if any of them are not meant. Torin, tell me truthfully, Seraphine, if I say them, meaning them, will you be saying them, meaning them also? She was sitting quite still. Her hands were flat on the arms of the chair. I will. All of them. All of them. I have known you 6 years. I have known you well for 4 weeks. I do not love you because you are kind to me. I love you because I have seen you work, and answer my question without flinching, and write 4 lines on a note with a string of pearls, and come to your mother's drawing room in your shirt sleeves, because you had been told I was in it, and did not think to wait for your coat. I am not speaking in a heat. I am telling you, in the coldest part of the night, that I will stand at the altar with you tomorrow and mean every word of the service. He had put both hands flat on the desk while she spoke, as though to hold the desk down. I have been a fool about you for 6 years, and I have not been a fool for perhaps 3 of the last 4 weeks. I was going to say it at the altar, by the form of the words. I do not think I can wait. I should like to say it here. Then say it. He came around the desk. He crossed the small space of carpet and knelt upon one knee beside the chair, and he took her hand, the right one, and his hands were not quite steady. I love you. I have come to love you in the manner of a man who did not know he had the faculty any longer. I loved you, a little, on the afternoon of your note. I loved you, certainly, on the afternoon in my mother's drawing room with the book of poems. I will love you tomorrow at the altar, and on the day after, and on the day of your death or of mine, whichever comes first. And I wanted to say it to you once, before the service, so neither of us could suppose I said it only because the service required it. She could not see him clearly. She bent her head. Torin, I have loved you, I think, since the afternoon you said, "Good girl." He gave a short breath, not quite laughter. I apologize for having said that. You meant it in the manner of a man who was relieved that I had done sensibly the thing he had asked. I loved you for it. I have been lying awake half of each night since, thinking about a man who says, "Good girl" to his affianced when she brings him bad news, because it is the only form of tenderness his circumstances will permit him to use. Seraphine, do not say anything, please. He rose. He did not release her hand. He drew her to her feet. She stood in her wrapper in the middle of his library, her bare feet cold upon the turkey carpet, and he put his free hand at the side of her face, and he did not kiss her, because the thing he was trying to tell her was not a thing a kiss would settle, and he held her face in his hand, in the manner of a man steadying an object he has been afraid to drop. I did not think I would be permitted this. I had made my peace with not being permitted this. You are permitted. I am going to go back to my desk. Do not follow me. Go upstairs. Sleep if you can. I will not see you again until the church. I will not touch you, Seraphine, until I have stood at the altar and said the words. I will not have our marriage begin with anything that was not made public and lawful first. I understand. It is right. Good. Go. She did not remember how she got back to the guest bedroom. She remembered only that she was lying in the strange bed with her hand on her cheek, where his hand had been, and that she wasn't afraid, and that the clocks struck 1 and 2, and at some point between 2 and 3 she slept, and woke in the clean, clear first gray of her wedding day. And as she lay there, with the wedding dress laid out in the next room and the small stirrings of a household beginning below her, she thought with a clarity she had not had in 30 days that the price her father's codicil had set upon her was not, after all, a price she had paid. It was the price she had received. She rose at 6:30. Berthwin came in at 7 with hot water and a face so carefully neutral that Seraphine understood at once something had happened. "Berthwin, what is it?" "There has been a letter delivered to His Grace at 6 o'clock, miss. His Grace has been at his desk since he received it. He has sent for his man of business and for Mr. Manning. His Grace has asked that you be informed that the arrangements for the morning are entirely in hand." "A letter from whom?" "I do not know, miss. The footman said it came by a servant in no livery who refused to give his name." Seraphine stood. "I must see him." "Miss, I am to tell you that you are not to go to the library." "Berthwin, if there is a letter that has come at 6 o'clock by an unnamed hand, and he will not tell me of it until after the service, I shall stand at the altar this morning with a thing between us I do not know the shape of, and I will not do that. Dress me. A morning gown, any." She went down the great staircase in her plainest morning gown, and Manning was at the foot of the stairs. "Manning. Where is he?" "In the library, madam, with Mr. Farish. Please announce me." "Madam." "Announce me, Manning." He bowed. "Very good, madam." The Duke was at his desk. Mr. Farish rose and bowed, and, without being told, gathered his papers and withdrew. "Seraphine, I had asked you not to come. I could not obey you, not today. Tell me, please." He held out a single sheet of paper. "Read it. Do not touch anything else on the desk." The hand was one she had never seen. An anonymous hand, plain, careful, unmistakably a woman's. "Your Grace, I write without signing my name, as I am a servant in a house to which I shall not refer. I was in the room at Cavendish Square in the spring of the year 1809, on the night upon which a poem of Mr. Wesson Derringham was read aloud. It was not Miss Ashbury who began the remark. It was a young woman seated at her left hand, who had the poem by heart from a relation at Christ Church, and who goaded Miss Ashbury into laughing at a line by pretending the line was to be laughed at. Miss Ashbury did not know whose poem it was. The young woman did. The young woman is at present in a position to press certain rumors against Miss Ashbury in connection with her present engagement to your Grace, and means to do so within the present week. If your Grace will call at a house in Hill Street between 3 and 4 this afternoon, and ask for me by the Christian name of Phillida, I will tell you all that I know. I have wished to speak of it to Miss Ashbury for 6 years. I write in the belief that I have been silent too long. Your Grace's obedient servant. P. She read it twice. Who is the young woman? I do not yet know with certainty. Farish has taken the letter away to make inquiry. You have a guess. I have a guess. I believe her to be Miss Oriel Carstairs. Seraphine shut her eyes. Oriel. She was my friend at school. She was the one girl in the room at Cavendish Square I trusted enough to laugh with. If this letter is true, she has been holding a knife to your throat for 6 years, for a reason she has never told you. What do? We marry at 12, as arranged. Farish will go at 3 to Hill Street. I will go with him, and my mother's brother, Sir Perry, who is a magistrate, and my cousin Kilgarn. If the letter is true, we will return with a sworn deposition and go to Miss Carstairs at 6, and we will give her the choice of writing a letter of full retraction under the witness of the magistrate, or of having the deposition laid upon the desk of her affianced and her father by tomorrow evening. She will choose the letter. Torin, I cannot stand at the altar knowing that you will be at a servant's door in Hill Street. I will not be at the door. I will be inside the house, in a morning room with a magistrate. It is clean, Seraphine. I will not compromise the day. I give you my word. Then I accept it. I will not think of Hill Street until you tell me it has been seen to. You will tell me afterwards. I will tell you everything. Tonight. She went back to the guest bedroom and sat at the small writing table and wrote, Auriel, I am to be married this morning at St. George's. You were at my side at Cavendish Square in the spring of 1809, and I have called you my friend. I know what you meant to do this week. I do not know why. If you wish to tell me why, you will come to me on the 11th of this month at 3, at my house on Adelphi Terrace, and you will tell me to my face. If you do not come, we will not speak again in this life. I write this on the morning of my wedding, because I do not wish any business to remain unsettled upon the day upon which I enter a new estate. Voici Berthwin. Have this taken to Miss Carstairs in Hill Street. Give it into the hand of the house porter, not by the post. Do not let Mr. Manning or any other servant of this house know of it. Yes, miss. Dress me now. In the gown. The service at St. George's was conducted at 12 precisely by the Reverend Dr. Allerby, with a small and carefully assembled company. The bride was composed, handsome, and gowned in silk the color of very cold cream. The Duke said his responses distinctly, and with evident feeling. The Dowager Duchess wept. What was not described in the papers the following morning was that, at 3:15, the Duke of Rookscar was driven in a plain carriage to the house of Lady Carstairs in Hill Street, accompanied by Mr. Farish, Mr. Kilgarn, and Sir Perry Vale, a magistrate, that they were received at the area door by Phillida Norwood, housemaid in the employ of Lady Carstairs, aged 29, who made before Sir Perry a sworn deposition, and named, under oath, Miss Auriel Carstairs. What was not described was that, at 5:30, the same party were received by Miss Carstairs in her mother's morning room, and placed before her a copy of the deposition, and gave her the choice between a letter of full retraction of every word she had spoken privately to Mr. Mornay and Mr. Pickering, witnessed by the magistrate, or of having the deposition conveyed to her affianced and her father within the hour. That Miss Carstairs, after 11 minutes of weeping, wrote the letter. What was not described was that, at 7:15, the Duke arrived back at Rookscar House, where his bride of 6 hours and 45 minutes was sitting in the small drawing room, still in her wedding silk, the pearls at her throat, a book open on her knee that she had not turned a page of in an hour and a half. That he put the letter of retraction into her hand and said, It is done. She will not speak against you again. That she sat down very suddenly, and he sat beside her, and she did not ask for another word that night. Then he said, Seraphine, I have said the words of the service, and I would be glad, if you are willing, to put my hand upon yours now. She put her hand out on the cushion between them. He covered it with his. She came down to breakfast at 9. The Dowager had removed herself the day before to Queen Anne's Gate with Aunt Blay, with a tact that Seraphine would always remember as the truest kindness any stranger had ever paid her. The Duke was already there with his paper. Good morning, my wife, he said, in a tone that made a title into an endearment, simply by the weight of the consonants. Good morning, my husband. Sit. Manning has made you chocolate. Oric is no longer in the house. I dismissed him last night. He had been in Hill Street on Tuesday last. I did not know it until Farish brought me Phillida Norwood's full statement. He had taken money from Miss Carstairs' household. I was not willing to sleep one night under the same roof with such a man once I knew. You are right. Torrin, there is one further thing I did yesterday which I did not tell you of. I wrote a letter to Miss Carstairs at 7 in the morning, before I went down to the library. I wrote it because I knew, the moment I read the anonymous letter over your shoulder, who it must be about. I wrote it because I could not wait for you to come back from Hill Street to speak for me. and because I did not want my first act as your wife to be an act in which you had acted for me, and I had not spoken for myself. What did you write? That I knew what she had done, that I did not know why, that if she wished to tell me why, she should come on the 11th at 3, and if she did not come, we would not speak again in this life. You sent that letter before the service. Signed. Signed with my initials only. Sealed. Sent by Berthwin to the porter in Hill Street. Not by the post. She will have had it before noon. He was quiet for a moment. Seraphine, you have done a very brave thing, and a very wise thing, and I do not know whether I am more astonished by the bravery or the wisdom. I only wish you had told me at 3 yesterday afternoon, because I would have gone to Hill Street differently if I had known she had already received your letter. I did not tell you because I didn't want to be told by you not to send it. I should not have told you not to send it. I might have. I would have been wrong. He put out his hand across the table, palm up, and she put hers into it, and they sat at the breakfast table with their hands joined across the cloth, and Manning came in with fresh toast and affected not to see. Oriel came on the 11th. She came in a black pelisse and a black bonnet, which Seraphine had not expected, and which was more disarming than any defiance would have been. Seraphine received her in the small drawing room at Adelphi Terrace. Berthwin was in the room. Seraphine had not sent her out. Oriel did not ask her to. I came, Oriel said. I see. I came because you gave me a choice, and I would not have forgiven myself if I had not taken it. Then take it. Oriel looked at the carpet. Seraphine. I was in love with Wesson Derringham. I had been in love with him since I was 16. He did not know. He did not ever know, because he was a man who did not look at young women for any purpose, except to write about them afterwards. And I was not the sort of young woman he would have written about. I was at Cavendish Square in the spring before he went. I had been given news by my brother, who had been at Christ Church, that Mr. Derringham had written a poem about the ending of an engagement he had lately formed and had lately broken. I had the poem by heart from a copy my brother had brought home. I began to speak of it. I said it in such a way as to make you laugh. I wished very much for somebody else to laugh at the poem along with me, because I could not bear to be the only person in England who found it ridiculous, when in my heart I found it the finest poem I had ever heard. I laughed at it because I could not endure the thing it told me, which was that he had loved a woman enough to break an engagement for her. I made you laugh with me because I could not laugh alone, and I have hated you for 6 years for the crime of having done what I asked you to do. I have hated you, Seraphine, and I have known all the while that I was the one who should have been hated, and I have held on to the hating of you because it was easier than the other thing. When I saw you become affianced to the one man in London who would never consent to be lied about, I thought that if I could break the engagement, I could make you the laughing stock I had made myself, in my own heart, for 6 years. I am not purged. I am the smallest I have ever been. I came today because you wrote me a letter that a woman of real generosity would write on the morning of her own wedding to a woman who had tried to ruin her. Seraphine did not speak for a long time. Oriel, you have been a great fool. You have been a fool of a particular kind, which I have also been. You have done me a wrong, which I will not pretend was small. You have tried to injure, through me, a man who had done you no harm, and whose friend you say you loved. I am not going to forgive you today, because I am not ready, and to say that I had would be the worst kind of lie. I am going to tell you what I will do. I will tell my husband what you have told me, because I will have no secret from him. I will ask him not to proceed further against you. I will ask you to cease from any further communication with me for the space of 1 year, and at the end of that year, If you write to me, I will consider your letter. I am not going to speak against you in any company. I am going to hope that in a year you will have become a person with whom I can imagine being in a room again." Auriel was weeping quietly. "Thank you. Go now." She went. Berthwin closed the door. Seraphine did not move. "Berthwin." "Yes, Your Grace." "Seraphine will do. Will you sit with me a little? I do not wish to be by myself." They sat together for an hour without speaking, and the afternoon light changed on the walls, and Seraphine wept a little, not for Auriel and not for herself, but for the one person in the whole account who had died at sea in his 24th year, without ever knowing that two women had loved him in their different ruinous ways. The season went on. The engagement gossip began to lose its edge because there was no new information to sharpen it, and by the end of the first month of her marriage, the whisper had been softened by the 1,000 small kindnesses of a dowager who knew every drawing room in London into the ordinary murmur that attends any marriage of conspicuous haste. There was one more thing to be settled, and it was settled by Mr. Everard Mornay. He had left town after the wedding and been seen at Bath and at Cheltenham, and it appeared he had understood that his season in London was done. And then on a Wednesday in the 4th week after the wedding, Seraphine was driving in the park with the dowager when she saw, upon the path, a figure she knew. "It is Mr. Mornay. I had understood him to be at Cheltenham. He has evidently returned. Mamma, I should like you to drive on and let me speak to him alone upon the path and come back for me in a quarter of an hour. I have a reason. I will tell my husband of it afterwards. On your head be it." The carriage moved on. Seraphine stepped down. Mornay came up. He did not smile. He did not look at her with any of the boldness he had used a month before. He looked at her as a man looks who has been reading about himself in a letter he has not been meant to see. "You may walk with me the length of that path to the gate. At the gate you will bow, and I will bow, and we will not meet again." They walked. The gravel sounded under his boots and hers. "Your Grace, I did not know, when I came to you at Lady Merricombe's, that the matter of the codicil had been told me by a person who intended to use me to injure you. I have since learned my error from a letter I received from a relation of mine who is close to the family of Miss Carstairs. I wish to tell you that I would not, had I known at the beginning what I learned at the end, have permitted myself to act in any of the ways in which I have acted. I am not a good man, Your Grace. I am not pretending to be. But I am not a man who would have acted as a tool of a grudge held against a woman who was, at the time of the grudge, a girl of 19 at a dinner. I do not expect you to acknowledge it, and I do not propose to mention it again." She walked with him in silence for 20 paces. "Mr. Mornay, I accept what you have said. I will tell my husband that you said it. I wish you a better life in Yorkshire than the one you might have had in Spain." They reached the gate. He bowed. She bowed. He turned one way along the park railings. She turned the other. That evening she told the Duke of the interview on the path. "You met him alone." "Yes, in full view, with your mother, in her carriage within recall. You did not think of asking my permission." "I thought of it, and decided against it. If I had asked, you would have gone yourself, and I did not wish you to go. I did not wish him to see you again. I wished him to leave London with his business settled between himself and me, because I had a part in it that was mine, and that you could not settle for me." He looked at her. He did not look angry. He looked very tired, and very attentive. "Seraphine, I had planned to say to you this evening a number of things I had composed in the carriage, which were all the kinds of things a new husband says to a new wife in the 4th week of their marriage. Having heard what you did in the park this afternoon, I find every one of those things is now either obvious to us both or beneath us both. I find I have married a woman who can be allowed to walk 20 paces of gravel path with a gentleman of doubtful character and come away from it without having made any mistake I can name, and who has done, in the managing of him, the one thing I would not have thought to do, which was to let him go with a piece of his own dignity in his hand. That was better than anything I should have done. I should have broken him. You sent him to Yorkshire whole. I am grateful to you for it. I am also, if you will allow me, a little frightened of you. You are not. I am. Not much. A useful amount. She laughed. It was the first time she had laughed aloud in his house. He looked at her, as though he had never heard a better sound. We are almost through with it. There is one thing left. My cousin. Your cousin is at Newmarket. He has not written. I believe, from what Farish says, that Lionel has understood the business is closed and has resumed his ordinary life. You are not to spend any part of the rest of your life worrying about him. That is a promise. Then I shall stop worrying. Torrin, I do not wish us to live in London in the winter. I wish to go to Faringmere. It is a house I was born in. I have not been back to it since my father died. I did not think I could bear it alone. I think I can bear it with you. Then next week we will go. Thank me by sleeping. You have not slept well this week. I have heard you. You have been listening for my sleeping. Every night, Seraphine. Every night since the first. She put out her hand, and he took it, and he drew her across the small space between his chair and hers, and he put his arms around her, and she rested her head against his shoulder, and after a while she did sleep against him, and he did not move. Faringmere stood at the end of a long chalk drive in the Downs of Hampshire, a house of grey stone set low against the slope of a hill, with a stand of beeches on the north side. The drive turned twice between walls of yew, and at the second, turning, the house came into view, and Seraphine put her gloved hand flat against the window of the carriage and did not speak for some minutes. There is a shutter at the south front that is hanging. That shutter has been hanging for 11 years. My father would not have it mended, because he said it reminded him that the house was older than he was, and would be so long after him. I see no one has mended it. Shall I mend it? No. I think I should like to leave it as it is. They were shown into the house by the housekeeper, Mrs. Tarrant, who had been in the Ashbury family's service for 34 years. Will you let me have half an hour in my father's study alone before dinner? I have not been in it since he died. It is as he left it, Your Grace. His papers upon the desk, his books. I have not moved one thing. She went in alone at 5 o'clock. She stood in the middle of the carpet and looked at her father's things. His pen was in the inkstand, dried. His spectacles were folded beside a book, open face down upon a chair. The book, when she picked it up, was the 3rd volume of Clarendon's History of the Rebellion. He had been reading about the death of Charles I. He had set it aside at the page upon which Charles was being taken from St. James's to Whitehall. He had not reached the scaffold. She sat in his chair at the desk. The chair was too large for her. It had always been too large for her. On the desk, under the pen stand, there was an envelope in her father's handwriting, addressed to her. She had not seen it before. She broke the seal. My dearest Sarah, I shall not send this. I have sat at my desk this morning and written it, and I shall put it under the pen stand, and I shall ride out, and either I shall come back or I shall not. I have a feeling today that I shall not. I have placed a condition upon my will concerning your marriage. I have done this because I have seen you refuse 4 men whose offers a less dear daughter would have accepted, and I have begun to be afraid, not of the refusals, but of the reason for them, which I believe to be that you have been waiting for a man who will not notice that you are waiting. I have a candidate in mind. I will not name him, because if I name him to you, I shall ruin him for you. He has come to 2 of my dinners in the past 12 months. He has argued with me upon both occasions about the Navy, and he has been wrong upon both occasions, and he has listened to me afterwards upon neither. I like him for it. I like him for the manner in which he turned upon the footman who dropped the fish at the second dinner, which was the manner of a man who had been taught to blame himself first and the servant second. I like him for the way he looked at you across the table when you spoke, which was, as a man looks who has set himself not to look and has failed. I will not write his name. If the condition in my will does its work, you will have found him by the time this letter reaches your hand, and you will know. I am, my darling girl, your father, who has loved you every day of his life, and has written you this letter in the foolish hope of being, even from the grave, of use to you. Papa. She did not move for a long time. She sat in her father's chair, in the thickening blue light of a Hampshire afternoon, and she understood a thing she had not understood in the 60 days that had followed. He had meant Torian. He had sat in this room a year before his death and watched his daughter refuse 4 men and dined the Duke of Rookscar twice and set the thing up without telling her, because he had known that if he had told her, she would have refused that offer also. He had built a box and put her in it, and left the key on the outside, and trusted her to find her way out by the only door he had allowed to be open, which was the door Torrin Vale stood on the other side of. He had not known how Torrin despised her. He had not known about the poem. He had only seen Torrin turn upon a footman and look across a table and argue about the Navy, and he had decided. He had died without knowing he had been right. The door opened. Torrin came in. Torrin, I wish to read you something. My father wrote it a year before his death. He put it under the pen stand. He meant me to find it. Will you sit? She read the letter aloud, steadily. She did not weep. She had done her weeping in the first half hour of reading it to herself. When she had done, she set the letter on the desk. He was looking at the carpet. I was at 2 of his dinners. I remember the footman and the fish. He was a boy from the village. He dropped the turbot entirely upon the Bishop of Chichester. And your father looked at me because I was nearest the bell, and I rang it. And when the upper footman came, I said, "A cloth and another plate for his lordship, and none of your observations for the boy." I did not know your father was examining me. He examined you twice. He examined me while he examined you, which I didn't know either. Seraphine, your father liked me. I dined at his table twice and argued with him about the Navy, and I was wrong, and I didn't listen. I would have liked him. I should have told him so. He knew. He ended the letter saying he had written it, in the foolish hope of being, even from the grave, of use to me. A man does not write such a sentence, except in the belief he will be read. Torrin stood up. He crossed to the desk. He did not sit in the chair where she was. He stood beside it, and put his hand upon the back of it. Seraphine, I am going to keep this letter. I am going to keep it in my desk at Rookscar House. I am going to read it once a year, on the anniversary of your father's death. I am going to become, over the years, a man of whom, if he were living, he would think, that is the man I thought he would be. I make you that promise in this room, in the chair in which he wrote the letter, with the letter between us on the desk. I wish to make one more promise to your father in his absence, as he made one to me in mine. I promise him, through you, that I will love his daughter as a man loves a woman who has been given into his hand by a wiser man than he knew to be wise, and that I will fail her as all husbands fail their wives, and that I will come back from each failure faster than the last, and that I will love her, at the end, better than I loved her at the beginning. She put out her hands. He took them. She stood up out of her father's chair. He took her in his arms, and they stood together in her father's study in the last of the Hampshire blue, and the letter lay on the desk between them, and somewhere on the south front, a shutter that had not been mended in 11 years swung in the small wind rising across the downs. They dined that night in the small breakfast room. Mrs. Tarrant had laid a small table by the fire, and they were served by the old footman Grigson, who had been at Faringmere since before Seraphine was born. And Grigson wept a little when he first came into the room, and recovered himself. After dinner, they sat by the fire in the small drawing room across the hall. The long windows showed only blackness and the rising of the wind. "My cousin Lionel, have you had any further communication?" "He wrote me last week. He asked for a loan of £600 to discharge certain obligations in Pall Mall," I replied by return. I told him I would not make him a loan, but I would, upon the single condition that he quit Newmarket and Pall Mall and present himself at an estate in Ireland, of which I have the management, there to work for 2 years in the office of the steward at a salary of £140 per annum, and his board, pay down his debts by a schedule of my devising, and at the end of the 2 years return to England, a man capable of earning his own living. I told him this offer would stand open 14 days. He has 8 days left. Will he take it? I think he will. He has no one left to feed him the belief that you or I are still to be used. It is the only offer he has left. If he accepts, you will not see him for 2 years. Thank you. Seraphine, your cousin is the last piece of the matter. When he has replied, the whole of it will be settled. The whole of it is settled. We are through. Yes. I should like in a little while to go upstairs. In a little while, then. They did not speak for a quarter of an hour. A log fell. Somewhere outside an owl made a single note, and another, and no more. They went up. The south bedroom, which had been her mother's, had been aired and prepared. The great bed was old, with posts. The sheets had been her mother's, folded in lavender in the linen press since her second marriage, and had been taken out that morning. Seraphine stood at the window. Torin came and stood a little behind her. She did not turn. Torin, I have been a wife for a month, and a wife in name only. I should like that to cease, this night. He did not answer. She felt his hands come upon her shoulders, and the weight of them through the wool of her shawl. Seraphine, are you certain? I am more certain than I have been of anything in my life. I am in my mother's room, in the house I was born in a marriage made upon the terms I proposed, and sworn upon the words I meant. To a man my father tried to leave me. If I cannot be so tonight, I shall not be so ever. Then turn around. She turned. He was looking at her, as he had looked at her across the fire on the night before the wedding, when he had knelt by her chair, and as he had looked at her in the carriage out of Bruton Street, when he had said, "Not while I am alive," and as he had looked at her on the morning of the wedding, when he had put the letter of retraction into her hand. All of those looks at once. She stepped into his arms. He rested his forehead against hers. He did not kiss her mouth yet. Seraphine, I am yours. I was yours, I think, before I knew it. I know. I was yours also. We were both slower than we should have been. He kissed her then. It was not a question. It was a statement. It was the statement he had been making at her for 6 weeks. In every other way he had been able to make it. And it was a thing given and received at the same instant. He drew back. He said, "Seraphine." And she said, "Come." And he came. The house was very quiet that night on the downs. The old house, with its shutter that had not been mended, and its fields outside where a man had died at a hedge, took its new master and its returning mistress into its keeping. And at some hour after midnight, a small snow began to fall on the beaches to the north, and neither of them saw it, because they had stopped looking at windows. In the morning, Seraphine woke first. She rose and went to the window and saw the thin white on the grass and on the drive, and the shutter hanging on the south front. She thought, I shall not mend that shutter either. Let it hang, as a small sign that we do not mend everything, and that we do not need to. She went back to the bed. He was awake. He said, "Come back." And she came. A year and 2 months later, at the end of the following spring, Seraphine stood at the long window of the drawing room at Faringmere. She was holding a letter from her cousin Lionel, who had taken Torrin's offer on the 12th of the 14 days, and who now wrote once a month from the Irish estate, short letters full of small particulars about a drainage scheme, and an ewe that had lambed twins, and a servant teaching him to read Irish, which he wrote he was no good at, and meant to persist in. He had paid down 400 of his debts. He had not been to Newmarket nor to Pall Mall in 13 months. She went out of the drawing room. She crossed the hall. She went into her father's study, which was now also Torrin's study, and which they shared. And Torrin was at the desk, and a letter under his hand, and he looked up. Lionel. All well. He's reading Irish. He reports that he is no good at it. He's not the first Englishman to make the report. She crossed to him. She stood by his chair. She did not sit on the arm, because a parlor maid was passing in the passage outside, and the door was open. Her hand rested on the back of his chair, and he put his hand over hers. There is one matter. I have heard from Havergill. The business of the estate is wholly settled. 3/4 of the capital is in the names of the trustees, for the purposes you proposed. The remaining quarter remains in your name. My estates are mine. The settlement is upon the terms you proposed, the day you first sat in my library. I tell you this because I wish you to know the terms were never altered, and will not be altered by me. She was quiet for a moment. Torrin, alter them. Seraphine, I wish them altered. I do not wish my house to be my house, and your house to be your house, and my estate to be my estate, and your estates to be your estates. I wish everything I have to be given into your keeping, and to accept into my keeping anything of yours. I propose Havergill draft a new settlement, in which all the properties are held in the joint name, to the survivor, and after the survivor, to the children of the marriage. I propose to tell my husband, in his study at Faringmere, that the terms under which I once asked him to take me were terms I set because I did not know him, and that having known him, I do not wish to be married to him upon those terms any longer, and that I wish to be married to him upon the ordinary terms of a woman who has married a man she loves and who loves her. He may refuse. I accept, upon one condition, that the proposal be drawn and executed in this room, at this desk, by Havergill, and that the signing of it be upon the anniversary of your father's death, which falls in 6 weeks, and that the document be kept in the drawer of this desk, which was his, beside the letter he left for you. Yes, Torrin, there is one further thing. I am with child. He did not move. Since when? Since, I believe, February. Dr. Halvey was here last week. The baby will come in October, or near it. Seraphine, sit. She sat then, upon the arm of his chair, because the parlor maid had passed on, and she put her arm about his shoulders, and he turned his face against her side, and he was quiet for a long time, and she felt his breathing change twice. After a time, he looked up. A boy or a girl? It cannot be known yet, Torrin. No. I asked because I wished to see what I would say if I knew. I find it does not matter to me in any degree whatever. What shall we call her? Her? I find I am imagining her. I had thought of Cordelia. It was my mother's second name, for her and for your grandmother. Elspeth was your grandmother. Elspeth Cordelia Vale. Very good. And if it is a son, I should like him to be called Wesson. She felt him beside her, not move. You do not object. I do not object. I had not asked, because I did not wish to raise his name in a house to which he had never been. He was my friend. It is a debt of years. They sat for a long while. The son moved along the carpet. Mrs. Tarrant sent up word about the menu for the dowager's arrival. The small business of the house pressed at the door, and they let it press. And Seraphine thought, this is my life now. And then she thought, no, this has been my life for more than a year. And then she thought, I was wrong to say that the price was a price I received. It was not a price at all. It was the place I was always going. I did not know the way in, and my father laid the stones of the path. After a while, Torin rose, and she rose, and they went out into the hall, and down the stone steps. And the wind of spring on the downs came across the lawn, and Torin put his arm around her shoulders before they went out into the sunlight, as had been his habit for 14 months. It was the single gesture by which she knew she was his, and he was hers. And in a drawer in a desk, in a study, in a house in Hampshire, in the years that followed, there came to lie, beside a letter written by a father a year before his death, 3 further letters. One, dated October of that year, announcing the birth of a daughter named Elspeth Cordelia. One, dated November of the year after, announcing the birth of a son named Wesson Torin. And one, very much later, dated the last day of a very long life, addressed to a grandson who was to be born 3 years after the hand had ceased to write, asking the grandson to go one day to Christ Church and to stand upon the staircase that faced the meadow, and to think for a moment of a young man who had died at sea in his 24th year, and of a girl of 19 at a dinner in Cavendish Square in the spring of 1809, and to understand that both of them had given him his grandfather and his grandmother, and that no story anyone lived was ever only their own, and that some prices, when they came to be paid, turned out to have been places. Thank you for staying with Seraphine and Torin from that first gray morning in a solicitor's chambers to this last letter in a desk in Hampshire. Their story began with a clause in a will and a clock running, and it ended in a drawer that held a father's letter, a signed settlement, and the names of 2 children who had not yet been born when the story began. What looked, at the opening, like a price set upon a young woman's life, turned out at the close to have been a road laid for her by a man who had loved her and had not lived to see her arrive. Every price in this tale became, in time, a place. That is the quiet reversal we wrote the story for. If this is the kind of story you want more of, follow along so you do not miss the next one. Until then, be well, and be good to the people who set the paths you are walking, even when you do not yet know that they did.